Is your crested gecko too small? In this video, I'm going to be showing you why your crested gecko isn't growing and what you can do to help them gain weight and size. Here is a general chart and a good rule of thumb to ensure you're keeping track of your gecko's health. And to give us a bit of knowledge, we must first look at crested geckos in their natural habitat, which is the island of New Caledonia located off the coast of Australia and above New Zealand. A quick weather search shows that the average temperature and humidity of the island stays around the mid-70s with lows of 65 and highs of 85. After knowing this, let's talk about humidity and temperature. One thing that I cannot stress enough is that drenched does not mean humid. If you constantly wet your gecko's enclosure, it can lead to foot rot. You want to make sure that your humidity can stay around 70% at night and around 40 to 60% humidity in the day. If you're having trouble keeping a higher humidity, I suggest using a humid hide with some sphagnum moss or getting a tub setup, which some keepers actually recommend over glass enclosures. I like using the I Heart Gecko's 10-gallon vertical enclosure kit because it keeps my humidity right at that sweet spot of 70%. Digital hygrometers are not hard to get nowadays and have become more available, so I suggest getting one. That way you can closely monitor the humidity of your gecko's enclosure. After all, keeping your gecko hydrated is one of the most important ways to ensure that they can keep growing at an adequate rate. Next on the list is diet. Now, although the primary food source should always be the gecko diets, like Repashy or Pangea, we have to remember that bugs live everywhere on this planet, and maybe even the galaxy.
Come on, you hate! You want to live forever?
So it's no surprise that crested geckos also eat bugs in New Caledonia. Crickets are like protein to crested geckos, and feeding them 2 times a week can definitely help with their growth. The reason I can say this confidently is because I was also having issues with my gecko's growth, and as soon as I introduced a cricket diet, I immediately saw results in the first and second months, taking my gecko from 5 grams to 8 grams and now 12 grams at this moment. And this was all just between a couple of months, like 2 or 3 months, that my gecko started growing that fast. Now, before you just throw the bag of crickets in your enclosure, it's best to gut load your crickets. Gut loading basically means feeding your crested gecko diet to the crickets before actually feeding the crickets to your gecko. This will maximize the amount of nutrients going into their system. I usually feed 3 crickets on Thursday and 3 on Sunday. And if I notice that my gecko isn't really eating the crickets, then I skip a day in the week and I switch to only feeding crickets on Sundays. Number 3 on the list is caging and lighting. In my case, this was definitely one of the driving factors that caused my gecko some stress. I had a light from my reptile thermostat, and I noticed that my gecko wouldn't move for hours and sometimes even up to a day and almost 2. As soon as I moved my thermostat, I noticed a change in my gecko's movements, and I noticed that he was just more active. Crested geckos are nocturnal and will usually be more active at night. Another reason they might not feel safe is having too large of an enclosure and not enough places to hide. I feel like the reptile community bashes on people so bad that inexperienced keepers don't want to look bad on the internet when they're posting their reptiles on Instagram or TikTok or wherever, and they end up getting a giant cage at the very beginning when their gecko is really small. This actually might do more harm for that gecko, especially if your gecko can't find his food dish at night. This is why, even though I got a lot of hate, I had my gecko in a critter keeper for the first couple of months because I noticed that he was developing those kind of stress behaviors. And as soon as I put him in the critter keeper, he actually started eating a lot more and he could find his food dish a lot easier. Some people also use 32-quart tubs for their hatchlings and their juveniles, and then move up to a bigger tub with proper ventilation once the gecko does get bigger. This is also a cheaper way to keep your gecko. Yes, it's not as aesthetically pleasing as a Zoomed or Exoterra enclosure with all these backgrounds and lights and everything, but tubs do tend to have a better humidity retention and they keep your geckos happy and healthy at a fraction of the cost. Make sure that while you're sleeping, there's minimal light on your gecko's enclosure, and definitely make sure that your gecko has enough places to hide. Number 4 and last on this list is you might have a runt. This may or may not be true, just because most geckos have no issues growing, but you might have everything checked out and perfect and still have a smaller than usual gecko. In this case, I suggest just being patient and monitoring them, making sure that they are pooping and eating correctly. And if their health does start to decline, then I would definitely recommend that you seek medical attention, go to a vet, so that you can have more experienced hands taking care of your gecko. And if I've missed any questions that you still have, I would love for you to comment down below. That way I can answer them. I have my notifications on, so I'll be able to respond as soon as your questions come through. And if you guys are like me and have no idea what plants to put in your bioactive enclosure, then I suggest you watch this video right here where I explain the best 5 plants to put in your bioactive enclosures. Have a good one and God bless.